Ivan Efremov, meeting above Tuscarora. Part 2. I signaled "Raise." The growing mass of light rushed at me. The waves threatened to strike again. The shine of the sea surface was unexpected and joyful. While dexterous hands took off my helmet and freed me from the weight of the spacesuit, my companion was lifted. Tiredly lowered on the bollard, I looked with admiration at the diver, who did not seem to have lost his cheerful vivacity even after the second descent. Well done, your chief mate," turned to the captain. "He did a good job. He and I, or rather he, made a research trip and found something in the commander's cabin." And he nodded in the direction of our prey, already raised on deck. "We'll deal with that later," said the engineer. "Now we'll shoot." The eyes of all the people gathered on deck were fixed in wary expectation on the small brown box of the inductor, before which the engineer was kneeling, twisting the crank. The crank was turning faster and faster, the little machine humming melodiously. Everyone listened with bated breath. It was very quiet. Only the splash of the waves came from over the high side. It was enough for the subtle movement of the engineer's delicate fingers on the button of the short-circuit switch, as the deafening rumble of an underwater explosion struck a nerve. Comintern swayed. Its iron hull rumbled like a giant grand piano. A high wave splashed from the port side. In the receding mass of water glimmered pieces of dark wood. A few seconds later, the surface of the water covered with a mass of blackened plates of cork. It surfaced cargo from the hold of the ship. All the sailors, from the captain to the cook, waited with equal eager attention to see what would happen next. A strong but muffled creak was heard, followed by a slight jolt, as if to give the steamer a lift from below. We continued to wait, but nothing more was heard. Only the waves were still splashing, and the debris that had surfaced after the explosion was thudding against the side. The general silence was broken by the calm voice of the engineer. "Well, Commander, let's move." "How? Is it already done?" The captain jumped up. "Of course." The captain rushed to the bridge. The telegraph rang, and the sudden noise of the machinery was not accompanied by a more terrible rumble. The ship came to life and moved. The waves rumbled under the bow. When Comintern turned, lying down on the course, we all shouted in unison, "Hooray for the engineer! To your stations!" was heard the captain's command, as usual smoking. On the bridge, and the deck emptied. I reluctantly rose from the bollard, approached the diver, my comrade in underwater adventures, and shook his hand. Then I looked back over the side, where in the distance the wreckage torn out of the sailing vessel by the explosion was rippling on the waves, and with an unpleasant feeling of some murder committed by me, I imagined that the vessel, which had wandered so long after its destruction, resisting time and the ocean, was now slowly sinking into the deepest abyss. The feeling of strong, nervous excitement that had possessed me all the time weakened and then disappeared altogether. Instead of it, an irresistible fatigue took possession of my body and brain. I told the sailor to take our findings to the navigator's cabin and went to the bridge. The captain saw me and gave me both hands. "Well done, Yevgeny Nikolaevich, well done. Thank you. We'll drink a can of first-class rum tonight with our main savior," a gesture towards the engineer. "And you go and have a rest. I can see how tired you are." I quickly came down from the bridge, and having rinsed myself under the shower, went to my cabin. Throwing myself into bed, I saw for some time the foggy underwater light, the rippling of the sun's glare, the blackness of the hold. The cabin shook evenly from the movement of the machine. The steamer calmly went its course. All that had happened was pushed into oblivion. In a minute I was already sound asleep. It was evening when I woke up with a feeling of something unusual that awaited me, and immediately remembered my findings. Having dressed and eaten hastily, I went at once to the captain's house, where I found a lively company, fueled by first-class rum, of which I myself am a great hunter. As soon as I arrived, the captain ordered a tarpaulin to be spread on the carpet, and we proceeded to open the crates we had found. A large box, which could not be opened with a chisel, as it was made of strong wood, was opened only after a few good blows with an axe. A strange, pungent odor wafted through the cabin. To our disappointment, all we found in the box was a mess of scraps of leather, all that remained of the ship's log. The captain, engineer, and mechanic laughed involuntarily as they saw our faces, mine and the diver's, stretch out. We opened one of the two small boxes the diver had found. It contained an antique bronze sextant. By rubbing off a layer of green on one side, I was able to read the Latin inscription. The meaning of it was that the sextant was made by Daniel, surname forgotten, mechanic, in Glasgow, 1784. This data, in fact, meant nothing, as English instruments could be on any ship, and they could be used for many years with the unusual durability of the old English instruments. The third box, however, brought us a joy well known to anyone who has achieved a desirable goal. The dilapidated wooden outer case, at the first attempt to open it, easily disintegrated in our hands, revealing a pewter jar glistening dimly in the bright electric light, covered with large drops of water. The jar was closed by a thick lid, thrust over the top, very tightly crammed. It was impossible to remove the lid, so we cut it along the top edge with a hacksaw brought by the mechanic. Under it was a second cover, flat, screwed on, with a ring in the middle. We unscrewed it with comparative ease, and with triumph extracted from the jar, the interior of which was only damp, but contained not a drop of water, a tube of papers. For the second time that day there was a friendly "Ura!" The carelessly folded, slightly crumpled stack of heavy paper, gray and very easily torn, became the center of attention. Some chemical process or dampness in the jar had destroyed everything written on the top and bottom of each sheet. Likewise, the sheets that made up the outside of the roll were very badly damaged. Only the few pages that made up the middle part of the bundle of sheets survived, as well as a separate quadruple-folded sheet of light yellow paper enclosed in the bundle. This sheet gave us the key to understanding what had happened. Large, uneven letters covered the 4 yellow pages in a slightly askew pattern. The antique English language made it somewhat difficult to read. The engineer and I parsed what was written, and the others helped in cases of difficulty. On a separate sheet was written roughly as follows: March 12th, 1793, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, latitude 38 degrees 20 minutes south, longitude 28 degrees 45 minutes east, according to the morning reckoning. The will of the Most High Creator be upon me. Accept, then, unknown people, my last greeting, and read the important messages I have enclosed herewith. I, Ephraim Jesselton, owner and captain of the beautiful ship St. Anne, am counting my last minutes in this world, and hastens to report the circumstances of my death. I left Kapstadt early on the morning of the 10th of March, having a direction for Bombay, with a call at Zanzibar. In the afternoon passed Cape Berry, beyond which I was met by an unusually large swell, which tossed the ship very violently. Toward nightfall a violent hurricane came in from the northeast, forcing her to drift, leaning to the Zuid under the foretopsails. All the next day the St. Anne lay adrift, struggling against the increasing force of the hurricane. Towards morning, The storm grew worse, reaching an unprecedented, unimaginable force. I lost one by one all the masts. The courage of the crew saved the ship from certain destruction. But the cup of suffering sent to us by fate was not exhausted. A series of huge waves mercilessly crashed on the ship, which, as well as its crew, was exhausted in the wild struggle. Leaks in the bow and on the deck deprived St. Anna of stability, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon the ship dived nose, then lay on its side, and began to sink. At the moment of this last irreparable disaster, I was in my cabin. Just then I entered and endeavored to reach. A very indecipherable piece of writing followed. Then again it could be read, the terrible cracking and lurching of the ship, shrieks and blasphemous curses overpowered the furious roar and crashing of the waves. I fell and smashed my head badly, then rolled back against the inner wall of the cabin, got up and made an attempt to get out through the door, finding myself now up in the middle of the wall. But the thick door was apparently blocked by something, and would not yield to my efforts. Gasping, covered with sweat, I fell to the floor in utter exhaustion, indifferent to my near death. After recovering a little, I tried again to break down, the door hitting it with a chair, then with a table leg, but only shattered the furniture without even damaging the door. I knocked and shouted until I lost all strength, but no one came to my aid, and I became convinced that my men were dead and waited for my demise. A long time passed, but the water in the cabin came in very slowly. In an hour it had not gained more than a foot. Shocked by the disaster to the core, I did not immediately realize that the very light cargo of my ship, we were carrying cork from Portugal, and the renowned strength of the hull of the St. Anne, would not allow the ship to go down at once. Thus I have some time to remember, before I perish, my discoveries. I want to endeavor to pass them on to the people, as through carelessness and an unquenchable thirst to replenish them, I have not had time to do so before. The unprocessed records of my explorations of the sea between Australia and Africa are kept in a special jar. I put this last record here, too, in the hope that the remains of my ship, carried on the surface of the ocean, will be either nailed to the shore or examined by someone at sea. I know that the valuables and documents of a ship are always looked for in the captain's cabin. The oil of the lantern, which has survived by some miracle, is burning out, and there is already 3 feet of water in the cabin. The satanic roar of the hurricane and the rocking continues unabated. I can hear the huge waves rolling overhead. Against the hull of the St. Anne, here it is, the wreck of all my schemes and a miserable doom locked up inside an already dead ship. But, however weak, however insignificant a man may be, a ray of hope lights me up. And if I do not save myself, then perhaps my manuscript will be read, and my cause will not be lost. We can't delay any longer. The water is coming faster, and will soon flood the cupboard on which I am writing standing and holding the jar of notes. Farewell, unknown people, and do not keep my secret as I did, you wretched madman. Make it known to the world. May God's will be done. Amen. The engineer finished the last words of the translation, and we were all silent for a long time, overwhelmed by this simple account of a terrible catastrophe and the courage of a long-dead man. The first to break the silence was the mechanic. Imagine him writing this by the dim light of an old-fashioned lantern, trapped in a perishing ship. Hard men were in the old days. "Well, I suppose there are some now," interrupted the captain. "Let us calculate. He wrote in 1793, which means that the ship sailed for 133 years before meeting us. "Another thing surprises me," said the engineer. "Look at the latitude and longitude of the disaster. It occurred somewhere off South Africa, and we collided with the St. Anna near the Kuril Islands." "Well, it is easy to find an explanation," the captain answered, and took out a big map of sea currents. "Here, see for yourself." The captain's thick finger slid over the blue, black, and red stripes on the blue background of the seas. "Here is a very powerful current of the southern latitudes. Certainly the catastrophe took place within its limits, to the southeast of Kappa. It goes eastwards almost to the western shores of South America, where it turns northwards. Here it meets a very strong southerly equatorial current going westwards, almost to the Philippine Islands, and here, against Mindanao, it is a complex cycle, because there are different counter-currents. Some currents go from here to the north and enter Kurosiwo. Now the path of this floating coffin is clear." A diver sitting near me turned to the engineer excitedly. "Comrade Chief, so he died in his cabin?" "Of course." "And how come me and the first mate didn't find his bones?" "What is there to be surprised about?" said the engineer. "Don't you know that bones in sea water dissolve with time, and 133 years is enough time for that?" "Wicked sea," said the inspector. "It finished the sailor and left no bones." "Why wicked?" I objected. "On the contrary, it took in even better than the land. Is it bad to dissolve in the vast ocean, from Australia to Sakhalin? Listen." "To him," the captain tried to joke. "You'll go and drown yourself." But nobody smiled at his joke. In concentrated silence we turned to the surviving pages of the manuscript. The handwriting was the same, but finer and smoother. It must have been written in quiet moments of reflection, not in the clutches of impending death. To everyone's disappointment, it proved impossible to read even the pages that were not completely ruined by the damp. The ink was pale and blurred. To parse a foreign language, and with unfamiliar old speech and terms, was an impossible task for us. We separated those pages that could be read. They turned out to be very few. But fortunately, they came one after another. They survived only because they were in the middle of the packet. Thus we had a whole, albeit insignificant, piece of the manuscript. I still remember its contents quite accurately. The fourth measurement was the most difficult. The crane girder was cracking and bending. All 50 men of the crew were exhausted, working at the scaffold. I rejoiced at the strength of the bims, and in general at the fact that I had put so much labor into building a ship of exceptional strength for long voyages in the stormy 40s. 4 hours of hard work, and above the waves appeared a bronze cylinder, my invention for taking samples of water and other substances from the bottom of the ocean. The helper quickly turned the crane beam, and the massive cylinder hung, swaying, above the deck. A very thin trickle of water squeezed out, by the tremendous pressure spurted from under the shutter. At this moment the boatswain threw over the detainer lever, but so unluckily that he struck Sailor Linham, who was stooping to pick up the last ring of purline. The blow struck him on the temple above the ear, and the sailor fell like a hamstring. Blood spurted from the wound. His rolled eyes and white-bitten lips showed that he was badly wounded. Linham fell directly under the water-measuring cylinder, and the water trickled down the cylinder and flowed over the wound. By the time we ran over and lifted the sailor up, the blood had somehow stopped flowing. It was not an hour before Linham, carried to the infirmary, woke up. He recovered remarkably quickly, though he had headaches afterwards, apparently from concussion. The wound closed and healed the very next day. At first I did not realize that the unheard-of rapid healing of The wound could be attributed to the fact that it had been exposed to water drawn from the depths of the ocean. The sailors, however, immediately drew this conclusion, and the rumor spread throughout the ship about the living water which the captain had obtained from the bottom of the ocean. In the morning, Sailor Smith came to me and asked me to cure a festering ulcer on his arm with the miraculous water. I soaked a handkerchief in the sample of water obtained yesterday and gave it to him while I studied the sample myself. Its specific gravity was quite high, heavier than ordinary seawater. Its color, poured into a clear glass, was unusual, a bluish-gray tinge. Otherwise, I could detect nothing special even to the taste. I poured the whole sample into a bottle to take to my friend, a chemical scientist in Aberdeen. When I had finished the work, I felt an extraordinary surge of vigor, some peculiar joy of life. I attributed this to the action of the deep water I had drunk, and apparently I was not mistaken. As for Smith's ulcer, in 2 days it was completely healed. From then on I kept a small vial of the marvelous water in my cabin all the way to England, and treated wounds and even stomach ailments with it very successfully. We took this sample from the deepest place, a large circular depression in the bottom of the ocean, at 40 degrees 22 minutes south latitude and 39 degrees 30 minutes east longitude, from a depth of 19,000 feet. This was my second great discovery in the ocean depths. Before this, I had considered the most remarkable discovery of unusually acrid red crystals at a depth of 17,000 feet, northwest of Cape Tempest. I dreamed that I would make 2 more urgent voyages with a cargo for money, damned money, and then be able to explore the depths of the ocean above the 40th latitude south of Kappa, where Captain Etherbridge had discovered huge troughs over a great stretch. I think I shall find in these mysterious abysses ancient substances preserved in the deep, where there are neither currents nor waves, and which have never appeared on the surface. How happy would the great La Perouse have been with my discoveries, who told me of his conjectures and actually turned my reflections to the depths of the southern latitudes. But death took this man of genius from us early. I, however, consider it premature to inform the world of my discoveries, and will not do so until I have explored the abysses of Etherbridge. On the last surviving page, the date, 20 August 1791, was underlined, followed by the words, "100 miles east of the eastern shore of Kafra Land, we met a Dutch brig, whose captain reported that he was on his way from the East Indies to Kapstadt, but had to divert to the west, escaping a storm. 3 days ago he had come upon a place in the sea covered with high standing waves, as if the water had been enclosed in a great invisible ring. These waves began to toss his vessel so much that the captain feared for the integrity of the seams and rigging, and indeed the brig soon gave a leak. Fortunately, the place was only a few miles wide, and the brig passed this area of standing waves fairly quickly under a fresh buckstag. I was interested to learn that a very rare and almost unknown phenomenon had been observed by this far from fictitious ordinary sailor. I, too, had seen this phenomenon, and guessed that the appearance of such waves always in a circular area denotes. This was the end of the page, and with it all the notes we could make out.